Welcome to today's deep dive. We have a highly specific mission for our conversation today.
Yeah, we really do.
And it's something you absolutely need to understand if you want to make any sense of the current global landscape right now. We are cutting straight through the noise of the global headlines to look at the hidden ripple effects of a major unfolding conflict.
Right.
We're basically going to map out exactly how international warfare is quietly threatening the tech you use every single day. I mean, quite possibly the very device you're listening to us on right now.
Exactly. I think the overarching theme here is that the systems powering modern life are they're far more interconnected and honestly significantly more fragile than anyone really acknowledges.
Oh, 100%.
When major geopolitical plates shift, the shockwaves don't just stop at borders. They travel directly into the microchips in our pockets and the servers running our financial systems.
So we're pulling the framework for this conversation from a really detailed dispatch published by a Patreon community called KULT. Specifically, this is from their Geopolitica e Economia collection.
They do incredible work bridging that gap between front-page war reporting and back-page business logistics.
They really do. So let's establish the timeline for you. Today is Thursday, March 5th, 2026. Exactly 6 days ago, on February 28th, a massive conflict erupted.
Yeah.
The United States and Israel launched coordinated attacks against Iran. These were operating under the designations Operations Epic Fury and Roaring Lion, and that triggered massive retaliatory Iranian missile and drone strikes across the entire Persian Gulf.
Right, and we are now on day 6 of a cascading regional conflict.
We are. But before we analyze the data on this...
Yeah, I should probably jump in here. We need to establish some firm ground rules for you, the listener.
Please do.
We are analyzing highly sensitive, politically charged events involving active international warfare. So this deep dive will take absolutely no sides regarding the United States, Israel, or Iran.
None at all.
Our sole focus is to impartially report the facts on the ground and unpack the economic and technological consequences of those events. We're not evaluating the geopolitics, the history, or the military strategies. We're looking strictly at global supply chains and digital infrastructure.
And that boundary is essential for looking objectively at the puzzle in front of us. Which brings me to the hook. This is the central question I want you to keep in the back of your mind as we navigate this whole thing.
Go for it.
What does a missile strike in the Persian Gulf have to do with the memory chip inside your smartphone or the AI models running in the cloud?
I mean, it sounds like an absurd hypothetical.
It really does.
But the answer is entirely grounded in physical chemistry and market concentration. The warning bells connecting those two vastly different worlds are currently ringing the loudest in South Korea.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because South Korea supplies roughly 2/3 of the world's memory chips. 2/3. Just think about that scale for a second. If you look at every corporate server, every laptop, every smartwatch on Earth, the overwhelming majority of the memory allowing those devices to function traces its lineage directly back to the South Korean semiconductor industry.
And that kind of market concentration means any disruption to their manufacturing capability, it ceases to be a local problem instantly.
It's a global crisis.
Exactly. In fact, ruling party lawmaker Kim Young-bae just held a critical meeting this Thursday with executives from Samsung Electronics and various trade groups.
And what was the vibe there?
The consensus from that room was stark. They're warning that a protracted conflict in the Middle East threatens to sever the supply of critical chip-making materials.
Which would inevitably drive up energy costs and spike material prices across the entire global tech sector.
Yeah.
So let's talk about those critical materials, because when people think of building a microchip, they usually imagine, silicon wafers or maybe highly conductive metals like copper and gold.
Yeah.
But the most pressing vulnerability identified right now isn't a solid metal, it's a gas. It's helium.
What's fascinating here is the specific chemical vulnerability they're dealing with. Manufacturing semiconductors is essentially an exercise in extreme physical manipulation at a microscopic level.
Right, let me put this into a relatable analogy for a second. Imagine trying to build a massive, high-performance engine for a Formula One car.
Okay.
You can engineer the best pistons, formulate the perfect fuel, design the most aerodynamic chassis, but if you don't have a cooling system...
That engine is going to literally melt itself into a block of slag the second you redline it.
Exactly. You cannot manufacture these advanced semiconductors without extreme thermal management. The manufacturing process generates immense heat, and helium is the absolute backbone of that cooling process.
Because you're dealing with nanometer-scale transistors, the precision required is incomprehensible to the human eye.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me these multi-trillion-dollar tech empires, the absolute smartest engineers on Earth, haven't figured out a synthetic alternative to a gas we use to fill party balloons?
They haven't. And it all comes down to the unbreakable laws of physics.
Wow.
Helium is uniquely inert, meaning it will not accidentally react with the incredibly delicate, volatile chemicals used to etch the chips. And more importantly, it has the lowest boiling point of any element on the periodic table.
So you literally cannot replicate those thermal properties with another gas.
You can't. It is an irreplaceable element for this industry.
Which brings the geopolitics crashing right into the chemistry lab.
Yep.
Because the semiconductor industry relies heavily on Qatar for this irreplaceable helium. Qatar is among the world's leading producers.
Right.
So this active conflict, with missiles and drones flying across the Persian Gulf, is happening directly over the shipping lanes and production zones of the one element the tech world cannot function without.
And it's not just helium. The South Korean Ministry of Industry mapped out this vulnerability further, flagging that their chip supply chains rely on the Middle East region for 14 other inputs.
14? Like what?
Things like bromine, which is used for specific plasma etching processes and as a flame retardant. Also highly specialized chip inspection equipment.
But, and this is a big but, while those 14 other inputs are critical to the assembly line, many of them can either be sourced locally within South Korea or procured from alternative markets globally if a crisis hits.
Right. Bromine is important, but you can find it elsewhere. Helium is the true, inescapable choke point.
Okay, so knowing that the global helium supply is actively threatened, we have to look at how the biggest names in technology are reacting to this in real time. Are they panicking?
It's a mixed bag.
Yeah, taking the temperature of the corporate response is a wild ride because it is entirely fractured. Let's look at the giants, starting with SK Hynix.
SK Hynix came out completely calm. I mean, they sought to allay market concerns immediately.
What did they say?
They publicly stated that they have diversified supply chains and sufficient long-secured inventory of helium. They went as far as to say there's virtually no possibility of the company being affected by this current crisis.
That is a staggering statement of confidence to make on day 6 of a volatile regional war.
It really is.
But then you look at their biggest rival, Samsung. Lawmaker Kim Young-bae just met with their executives behind closed doors, but publicly, Samsung declined to comment entirely. They are completely silent.
And that silence is a massive variable. It doesn't necessarily mean they are out of helium today, but it indicates a severe level of caution about making forward-looking statements while the conflict is escalating.
Because if you assure investors you're fine on Thursday and a cargo ship gets hit on Friday, your stock plummets.
Exactly. And then you look outside of South Korea to the other global heavyweights.
Right, TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They're taking a very measured approach. They stated they do not anticipate any short-term impact, but will actively monitor the situation.
Very standard PR.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Global Foundries offered a reassuring stance, stating they already have mitigation plans in place and are directly in contact with regional suppliers.
So we have 4 vastly different postures here.
Supreme confidence, total silence, cautious monitoring, and active mitigation.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals something crucial about the tech industry's geopolitical foresight. The semiconductor industry hasn't actually been caught off guard by a war in the Middle East.
Really?
No. Industry officials pointed out that tensions in this region have persisted for years. Chip makers have been proactively diversifying their sources and hoarding materials in advance as a precautionary measure. They modeled out this exact nightmare scenario years ago.
But hoarding helium sounds like a logistical nightmare. It's a gas that notoriously escapes from almost any container over time. You can't just pile it up in a warehouse like copper wire.
You're absolutely right. The atomic radius of helium is incredibly small, so it literally leaks out of microscopic imperfections in storage tanks.
So how do they store it?
Maintaining a long-secured inventory, like SK Hynix claims to have, requires highly specialized, incredibly expensive cryogenic storage facilities.
Wow.
It just shows how much capital these companies are willing to burn just to ensure themselves against Middle Eastern geopolitical volatility.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Up until this exact moment, we have entirely focused on the supply side of the equation.
Right, getting the helium, making the chips, shipping them out.
Exactly. But there is a massive, sudden threat to the demand side of the tech industry.
The dynamic completely shifts here, from the pristine manufacturing floors in South Korea to the end user. and it centers entirely around the global boom in artificial intelligence.
Lawmaker Kim summarized this pivot perfectly. He said, "We say the semiconductor supercycle has arrived, but it's very likely that data center plans will be disrupted, which could create problems with chip demand."
This semiconductor supercycle is the unprecedented, frantic global rush to build AI capabilities. Every major corporation wants more chips to train larger, more complex models.
And to do that, you don't just need the chips.
No, you need massive, power-hungry new facilities to house them.
And this is where the abstract talk about technology comes crashing into brutal physical reality. Major tech companies had grand, multi-billion-dollar plans to expand AI data centers right there in the Middle East.
Yeah,
But earlier this week, the conflict didn't just disrupt the shipping lanes for materials, it destroyed the physical infrastructure.
this is the crazy part.
Amazon confirmed that drone attacks actually struck and damaged 3 AWS data centers located in the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain.
It turns out the cloud isn't a magical, invisible force field in the sky.
Shocking, I know.
It's just a heavily air-conditioned, incredibly loud, windowless warehouse sitting next to a highway in Bahrain.
And 3 of those physical warehouses just got hit by military drones.
The fallout from that physical damage is immediate. Amazon had to take key AWS services completely offline, and they are promising a quick patch. They are explicitly warning of a prolonged recovery.
Think about that. If you run a startup in Dubai or a logistics company in Riyadh, your entire backend might just be gone today because a piece of shrapnel hit a cooling vent on an Amazon data center.
It completely changes the narrative.
It does. The conflict in the Persian Gulf isn't just stopping the helium from reaching South Korea to build the chips. The conflict is physically blowing up the buildings in the Middle East where those South Korean chips were ultimately meant to live and operate.
It is hitting the ecosystem on both ends simultaneously. Supply is choked, and demand infrastructure is literally burning.
Which creates a tremendous bottleneck for AI expansion.
Absolutely. If you were a tech giant, you might have secured the chips. But if the secure, climate-controlled data centers in emerging tech hubs like the UAE and Bahrain are now active target zones, your deployment schedule is completely shattered.
You cannot install billions of dollars of delicate microprocessors into a building that might be targeted by a drone strike tomorrow.
You just can't risk it.
So, what does this all mean? Let's bring this right down to you, the listener. Why should you, going about your daily life, care about a shortage of Qatari helium or a damaged Amazon server building in Bahrain?
Because the modern world is entirely built on top of this invisible, highly physical infrastructure. This isn't just about abstract corporate profits.
Right.
It's about the apps on your phone functioning seamlessly. It's about the banking systems that process your transactions, the logistics networks that ensure groceries reach your local store, and the future AI tools your job might soon require you to use.
We're looking at a shockingly fragile web. We say things are processed in the cloud, but the cloud relies on physical concrete buildings in places like the United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
Those buildings are stuffed with memory chips manufactured thousands of miles away in South Korea, and those chips can only be built using helium pulled out of the ground in Qatar.
It's wild when you trace it all back.
And when a trade war turns into a shooting war involving the US, Israel, and Iran, that entire web shudders violently.
The consequence for the consumer is practically guaranteed at this point.
More expensive everything.
Exactly. It means increased costs passed down to you across the board. Hardware gets more expensive. Cloud storage subscriptions go up.
Delays in tech.
Right. It means disrupted advancements. That highly anticipated new AI feature on your phone gets delayed by a year because the processing power simply isn't available. And as we saw with the AWS strikes, it means potential, unpredictable service outages for the platforms you depend on daily.
For all of our incredible advancements in artificial intelligence, for all of our seamless global connectivity, how fragile is the actual foundation of our future if it fundamentally relies on a physical supply chain that runs directly through an active, multi-nation conflict zone?
This raises an important question, and I think it is the ultimate paradox of modern technology. We design the most intellectually complex, sophisticated digital systems in human history. Artificial intelligence that can write code and diagnose diseases. But those systems remain totally tethered to raw earth elements and the volatile whims of regional geopolitics. We haven't transcended physical reality, we've just made a reliance on it much more complicated.
So, to recap the journey we've taken today, We started with a stark warning from South Korea's chip sector, a powerhouse that provides two-thirds of the world's memory chips.
Right.
We dug into the terrifying, irreplaceable nature of helium for thermal management during manufacturing and how Qatar's supply is now caught in a war zone.
Yep.
We analyzed the wildly different panic levels of corporate giants, from SK Hynix's calm, incredibly expensive stockpiling to Samsung's total, unnerving silence.
The contrast there is still amazing to me.
And finally, we saw how the conflict literally rained down on the cloud, with drone strikes physically damaging Amazon's AI data centers in the Persian Gulf, proving that the digital world is very much physical.
As we close, there is a final lingering thought to mull over, and it builds directly on the revelation that chip makers have been proactively diversifying their sources away from the Middle East for years to protect their supply chains.
What's the thought?
Well, if global tech companies successfully pivot, if they find new ways to secure essential materials outside of this conflict zone and refuse to build new servers there, what happens to the economic future of those Gulf nations?
Oh, wow. Because places like the UAE and Bahrain have massive public ambitions to transition away from petroleum-based economies. They want to become the world's next great AI and data center hubs.
Exactly. If the tech industry decides the region is simply too physically volatile to host their multi-billion-dollar infrastructure, those nations might find themselves stranded.
That's a brutal reality.
Their grand transition plans could evaporate, leaving them behind by the very technological future they are desperately trying to build. The decisions made by tech executives in Silicon Valley and Seoul this week could alter the economic destiny of the entire Middle East for decades to come.
It really shows just how high the stakes are, stretching far beyond the battlefield and straight into the global economy. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope this conversation has given you a much clearer lens through which to view the news, and we encourage you to keep questioning the invisible, physical systems that power your world. Until next time, stay curious.